You're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. I'm your host, Shane Darby. In this episode, we chat with Nathan Bennett, the Superintendent at the Royal Adelaide Golf Club. I last visited the links at Seaton back in January 2020, immediately prior to the club's staging of the Australian Women's Open, won by Inbee Park. Over the course of 6 wonderful days on site, I was struck by the welcome afforded to me by the club's Golf Mad membership, its colonial clubhouse and world-class golf course laid out on the Adelaide Sandbelt. We chat about Nathan's journey from country Victoria work experience at Murray Downs, then on to the Metropolitan Golf Club in Melbourne, Moonah Legends course Grow-In, the Sands at Torquay, and then on to Royal Adelaide, where he's been superintendent since 2012. We explore the specifics of the Seaton site, such as grass types, irrigation, and a groundbreaking project that the club partnered with the state government to become net contributors to the aquifer that runs deep below the city of Adelaide. We also take a look at how Nathan and the club interact with their long-standing consulting architects, Renaissance Golf Design, specifically their design associate Brian Slonick, who has relatively recently tweaked the par 4 10th hole at Royal Adelaide. Nathan's a top bloke who I really enjoyed chatting with. We hope you enjoyed the listen. Thanks for tuning in. Nathan Bennett, you're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. How are you? And more importantly, well, not more importantly, equally importantly, how is one of my favourite golf courses in Australia faring as your days get a little shorter and minds perhaps start wandering towards winter renovations?
Yeah, I'm good. It's good we've sort of come out of a summer. So the summer was been a bit up and down. We're pretty mild at the start of summer and damp more than usual, but it got pretty warm and it's been really dry. We haven't had rain now for probably 3 months, maybe 3 or 4 mil here and there, but it's pretty dry. So coming into autumn, halfway through autumn, it is pretty dry here. So, but it's been a pretty good year. The numbers are still increasing every year with golf members. So that, that's a lot of that to do with COVID and just members, I think, all over the world wanting to play more golf and want to get bang for their buck. So, but the course is really good. We've just changed a few things as the years have gone on, a few different philosophies we've changed, but it's holding together pretty well. And I think we'll go into winter with a pretty good surface. It'll just hold us a bit better before we come out in sort of September. We get back into it in renovations in September, and away we go again. So we've really only got sort of that 3.5 months now of slowed right down, and then we're away again. So, but still, relatively good.
I was going to say that things were cooling down over there, and they are, relatively speaking, for Adelaide. Yeah. But I was looking at the Bureau of Meteorology weather forecast for the next few days. Sunny, 22, 23 degrees.
Yeah, it's still cool for us.
Mate, that's like a good Irish summer's day. So
yeah, that's and it's the overnight temperature, but it is pretty cool. So I don't know what we average during a hot summer. We can get a week of above 40s, but we had some pretty hot ones here this year, but not long periods of it. But it's cooling down. The couch grass, which is on all our surfaces except for the greens, they really start to slow down now. So we back our cutting off, and some days we're only cutting just to get rid of divots, clean them up. Uh-huh. So we'll back off probably more over the next month, back down to probably once a week cutting rather than 3 times a week.
Okay. I understand you've had a busy few weeks with the live event taking place up the road at the Grange Golf Club. I believe a 96,000 crowd attendance was reported over the course of the event. And I suspect many of those inbound interstate visitors may have tried to make a beeline for the sanctuary of the links at Seaton. Was that the case?
Yes, yeah. We definitely were busy over that what was probably 5-day period. So we had a public holiday on the Thursday, which is our Anzac Day, and then so we had the biggest day the club's ever had. We only ever have a 1-tee start, but we had, I think it was 230 play off the first tee, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday were double shotgun starts, and that was just to get as many people on as we could. They all wanted to play in the morning, and then the afternoon go over and watch live because it doesn't start till 12 o'clock. So huge amounts of golf, a lot of reciprocals, but also a lot of corporate people that have been booked in for nearly 12 months all wanting to play on those days. And it was so a good we're able to display the course to a lot of people that haven't played it before, or to our reciprocals from all over the country and probably overseas, but also to a lot of people that haven't played here before. Come over and have a hit, have a look around and enjoy the golf here, what then heading over to Live and playing there. So Live at Grange Golf Club is literally, as a crow flies, about 400 metres, but probably more like a 1.5 kilometre walk out and around the road and into their entrance gate. So a lot of members played, or a lot of golfers played here in the morning and then walked over to Live in the afternoon.
Did you make it over to watch yourself?
I did, yeah. Went over on the Friday. Just the crowd, the atmosphere is electric. The crowds. I think Australia's really good at watching any sport. That's one of Australia's favourite pastimes. But and having a drink at the same time. So it's that combination. But also we've been starved of big golf. We have things like the President's Cup coming around every so often, but even that isn't the big. It's some big names in that, but this field is exceptional, and they all turn up and they're really relaxed. They get into it. They're all wearing shorts. They're not so controlled. They really enjoy the week. They get in. They get amongst all the crowd. They also get out and go to other clubs before the event. So it's good we had a few players come over during the week and do some videoing over here on the course, and some product displays they had set up, or doing some videos for it. So it was a really good week. And the amount of people that were in town. So I think I heard a stat that's only 40% of the tickets are sold from Adelaide. The rest of them are outside of Adelaide. So the amount of people that come to town is massive. And that spreads from everywhere, from golf all the way through to the city, to the shops, bars, restaurants, accommodation, flights, you name it. It's crazy for the 4 or 5 days. So, and it's a lot of young people. Whether you've ever been to one of them, but a lot of people that are not golfers, a lot of 18 to 27-year-olds that aren't golfers, they're all turning up and getting into it. They're all wearing the golf memorabilia. They've all got the hats and shirts, and they're right into it. And whether that translates into more golfers, but it's definitely sparked interest in the game of golf. And I think that's only good for the sport. If we get more people involved that aren't 65, we get the 25-year-olds involved. And golf's got a bright future, I think, because of it.
It was some week of coverage for Adelaide, all in, between the Live event and something else I noticed online.
Gather round, maybe?
Well, no, Tim Jordan and course committee member Terry Thornton hosted a few dudes recently from some minor podcast. I don't know. I've never heard of it. No laying up, apparently. It's obviously a joke. Sorry, lads, if you're listening. First, the RA looked pure in the extended footage in episode 2. If listeners haven't seen episode 2 of Tourist Sauce, you really should tune in. The guys really seem to enjoy the experience, and it will undoubtedly whet the appetites collectively of watchers and to travel to Adelaide and visit Royal Adelaide. I guess in particular, something that gave me a bit of a kick, it was really good to see them chilling in the shade of the clubhouse terrace post-round, as is de rigueur for the members and their guests. Doing that with some of your esteemed and not so esteemed members is a memory that I still cherish 4 years later. Just wondering, did you get a chance to interact with the lads when they were in town?
No, I saw them briefly when they were coming along getting set up. So I saw Tim and Terry and had a quick chat with them before they head off. And then I tend to leave those guys alone. The people that are out there, I could see them doing some video footage and some going around. So we sort of kept away from them as much as we could. Same with our staff, trying to keep away from that sort of stuff. Limit the noise, or limit the interaction with that, so that we're not disturbing them. But it was good. And then I listened to the podcast a couple of weeks out when it came out. It was really good. Terry's such a wealth of knowledge and has such a great golf brain that he thinks about things logically, and he's great. He's really good to have around the club, and he sees a lot of golf all over the world, all over Australia, and he's got a good, really, really good understanding of golf, and doesn't get caught up in the individual opinions of people that make it. People have an opinion on something and they think that's right, but Terry just sees it as a whole picture. So it was really good. I think having Tim, the club captain, it was great having those two go around, and Tim's very passionate about the club, and that's why he's in that position, and he's great. He's coming to the end of his tenure in the next sort of 10 weeks or 8 weeks, but it was great having those two guys go around and play, and then Terry do his podcast, which was great. So good for them. But I didn't interact with the boys too much.
One of the themes that I extracted from the particular piece that they did on Royal Adelaide is something that I guess I've been thinking about really since I was last there. The welcome that the staff and the members extend to inbound visitors is almost unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I think sort of 4 areas sort of are covered there. There's a confidence in terms of the identity and history of the place. There's an authenticity in terms of a knowledge and a direction and a golfing IQ, if you like. It's very rooted in the place and the community. And I suppose it actually has a golf leadership role both in South Australia and wider Australia, and is very, very confident and conscious of that. The custodians at Royal Adelaide, including yourself, appear to consistently be on top of your game and striving for, just those marginal gains and excellence, I suppose. So kudos to you and to the team there and to the wider membership. It's a special place.
Yeah, it is a special place, and I think working there is you sort of get used to it after a while, but you do sometimes pinch yourself, and particularly when there's beautiful days or beautiful sunrises, which we all get to see as staff members. But it is such a place that doesn't matter when you come in the gate, doesn't matter what standing you have in the community or what you're worth or what you do. Once you're in the door, you are just a member like everyone else. So that's the thing that I love about it the most. I think people from the outside may have a different perception because they just think it's, maybe it's an elitist club, but it's definitely not that. They include everyone. As I said, it doesn't matter what level you are and what position you hold or what job you have, you're all the same. So you come in, once you come in, you're part of the fold, and they interact, and everyone's inclusive, and it's really supportive. So a visitor turns up, they're really, really warm, and they're very proud of the place. They're very proud of their golf club and their golf course and the clubhouse. And the clubhouse is such a unique place that we haven't bowed to the general feel in the community that golf clubs, rebuilt their clubhouses and made them more glamorous and prestigious. The clubhouse still has the same feel as it did back in the 30s. The floor still creaked. You walk down the hallway, there's different heights through the hallway. There's the old fireplace. Everything feels really homely, and it's got a lot of soul. It's a really soulful place, and you walk in, then you feel warm and cozy during winter, and during summer you feel cool and relaxed. The air conditioning going when it looks so hot and dry outside. It has this really, really wonderful feel inside. And I think, as you've alluded to, you feel that when you come in. You feel welcome when you come in, and you feel like it's not sterile. I think that's pretty unique, and the club knows what they're trying to do. They want to continue to hold their standing within the golfing community and keep being a leader, but also not discarding everyone else, including other clubs, and in trying to keep ticking along and moving forward, which is what we're all trying to do.
Well, look, we will get back to the club and course in a little while. However, I'm keen to delve a little deeper into your backstory by way of an initial chinwag. Nathan Bennett, wheat farming stock from country Victoria. So you're a Victorian fish out of water in South Australia, as it were. Yeah. So I think your greenkeeping journey started at Murray Downs with work experience. Maybe you might talk to us about where your turfy travels have taken you.
Yeah, so you're right. So up a wheat farm in country Victoria, a little place called Quambatook, which is way up about 4 hours north of Melbourne, up near the Murray River. So I started up there, finished my schooling, and did a week's work experience at Murray Downs. And Richard Forsyth was the super there. At the end of year 12, I got a call from Richard, and he, in that time, had moved down to Metro and called me up, wanted to know whether I wanted a position down there as an apprentice. Me not having any idea of what that golf, I wasn't sure what Metro was like. So I did some research for a couple of weeks and realised that it was held in pretty high regard. So not liking Melbourne, being a country boy, it was difficult to make the decision, but I decided to take the job and move to Melbourne. So I moved away from all my family, moved down to Melbourne, didn't know anyone, and away I went. So, but, and I think that probably helped because I loved work and I hated living in Melbourne. So I would spend all my time at work, and so they become my family. All the staff there were such, I become really close with them. I still am really close with a lot of the guys that were there. So, so it was awesome to be in that group and to have Richard sort of bring me up there bring me down to Melbourne and really educate me in turf, but also work ethic. Getting on with it and just striving we want to be the best at whatever we do. And that's what he sort of instilled in me really, really early. And that's what he's instilled in so many people in the industry. And I think he's I think he's the industry leader in Australia, definitely, and possibly not the world. He's exceptional at what he does, and he's got a great record of staff that have come underneath him. So worked there for about 8 years, went my way up, did some tournaments there, did the World Match Play back in 2001 and Aussie Open, and then from there left Richard and Metro, went down to Moonah Links down on the Mornington Peninsula. So one of the assistant from Metro moved down to Moonah Links as his superintendent about, I don't know, might have been 2001. And so then I followed Lee down about 6 months later, became his assistant. I finished the grow end of the Legends course. So there's two courses there, the open course, which was built for Aussie Opens. It's a stadium course, big, brutal, long, tough course. And the Legends course was a different style, more fun and enjoyable. So I really enjoyed that growing. It was great big growing in a course, no golfers. It was the best part of it. Didn't have to deal with any golf balls being hit my way. So I really enjoyed that. I was there for about 4 or 5 years and did 2 Aussie Opens which was great. And then from there, I left and took my first superintendent's job in 2006, I think it might have been, 2006. Went over and took a job at the Sands Torquay, which was a newly built course designed by IMD and with putting Stuart Appleby's name to it as a designer. But I'm not sure Stuart had much or anything to do with it. But residential course, started there. The course had been finished, but I took over the role of superintendent pretty early on, and then housing was put through it, and they've gone through their ups and downs with residential, and then money issues, and it's still ticking along, but it's sort of fluctuates in how it's going and being bought and then sold and working its way along. So, and that was really good. So I've moved from a private club down to Moonah Links, which was a public access course, but had expectations of being a championship and really held in high regard. Then moved back to the Sands, which was a semi-private, had members, but there was also a lot of pay for play coming through. It was Torquay's a tourist town. It's where the Bells Beach and Rip Curl and Quicksilver it's all in there. So it's a pretty touristy destination. So a lot of people come down and want to play golf. So there was that member, but also pay for play aspect to it. And then the job come up here at Adelaide, and I wasn't thinking about leaving, but the job come up, and these sort of positions don't come up very often. Had a mate living over here, Steve Newell, who was from my days at Metro. He was then the superintendent at Counrty Golf Club, which is up the road. Spoke to Steve, and he spoke really highly about the club and how it's run and how it's the direction it takes. So I thought I'd throw my hat in the ring, not thinking I'd get it, because I started from a low base. The Sands was a pretty low profile club, and interviewed and must have struck a chord somewhere, because luckily enough got the job. And you don't think about it. I think about it now, and it was amazing then, but I think about how that changed my life, getting that job here. I packed up, it's like 700 kilometres away, but packed my family up. I had a young family. My kids were like 6 and 8. Packed up, moved over. They supplied a house, which is unheard of now. Some of the old clubs still have them, but not many. They supplied me a house on course, and I moved over and loved every minute. I love every minute. I love the club. I love working here, and I love living here. So it's such a beautiful place to live. It's a bit like a big country town. So if you haven't been to Adelaide, I know you have, but if other people haven't been to Adelaide, that's what it's like. A big country town. Everyone's friendly and they're all accommodating. So it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, there's a nice contrast, just generally speaking, between Adelaide and other locations, other cities in Australia. Obviously, Melbourne and Sydney are quite big and sprawling, and just take a bit of getting used to in terms of. But as you say, Adelaide and I guess Perth, probably to a certain degree, they're that little bit more intimate because they're smaller, that easier to get around, and just a really cool vibe. I mean, the foodie culture in Adelaide is outstanding, and if you like your wine, there's nowhere better. Like
Barossa Valley, McLaren Vale, all these places, world class wine, or even world class wine. So it's funny. I'm sure the membership here have their own currency, which is wine. You see them often talking about wine. There's so many wine owners here, and they are winery owners, and I'm sure they all swap wine out of their boot and buying some and swapping some. So it's a really cool culture. But the wine industry over here is huge. And it's a big draw card for both golf. And we interact a little bit with the wineries. We have a little thing called the Four Reds, where the 4 golf clubs get wine involved and wineries, and then they serve food that interacts with the different wines and have a little group booking system. So that works pretty well. The clubs understood that, and they go with it as well, which is pretty cool.
Well, listen, thanks for the initial intro to your backstory. I think maybe if we take a look, first of all, at the site at Seaton, a little bit of history, first of all, maybe. It was not the club's original location. I believe the first golf course, or first iteration of Royal Adelaide, was at Glenelg, just down the road.
Well, I think they actually played in the parklands around the city.
Beg your pardon.
Initially.
Okay.
Yeah, so they initially played in parklands, which is so Adelaide's really unique. It's the city. Then they've got parklands run all the way around the outside. So it's a ring of parks around the city, and in the north side of the city, it's a pretty affluent area. But they play golf in there for the first probably, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 years. And they got I just put a plaque up there about 2 years ago to denoting where the course was. So they played in there for about, I think maybe for 4 or 5 years before they moved to a parcel of land in Glenelg.
Yeah, note to self, next time you're reading a centenary book, Shane, read it properly and take proper notes. Anyway, after being corrected by the superintendent, which I thank you for, they were then in Glenelg. Yeah. So when the club originally moved to Seaton, in 1905, I believe the site was originally 240 acres. Mm. So I guess before we get stuck into a little bit more of the specifics, if you like, you might describe the site as it is today. What component parts are in evidence in terms of flora, fauna, soils, and anything else of initial introductory note?
So the site is it's not predominantly flat, but it's probably a third of it, or no, probably half. It's flat. It's quite flat in view, but also it was pretty swampy back in the day. There's aerial photos, and you see lots of water further away from the course, but there's this beautiful big sand dune right in the middle, and it runs out into different directions of snippets of little sand dunes the further it goes. So the train line followed the wet area right through the flat area right through the course, and I think back in the day they must have caught the train and saw these sand dunes, so they went to purchase it. So it was a large site, and they've obviously as the years they've sold areas off, but they've maintained or retained the sand dunes and the better part of the course. But you come to the front gate and it's very flat. So it's good because you can see from the front gate, you drive through the practice fairway, but you can see so many holes as you drive in. The clubhouse sits up in this little rise, and then over the train line, the course continues up the big sand dune until you get to the top of it, where it's covered in some pine trees. But it's a really linksy, open style course. The flat parts of the course are really heavy clay soil. So the water table, we have to dig a hole about anywhere from 3 foot to a meter, and we get water coming into the hole. So the water table is really quite high in those areas, and it's heavy soil. But as soon as you start working your way up into the dunes, the sand is amazing. The sand is that really bright, reddy orange color. So if you see any photos of the bunkers in the sand, that's the color that's in there. So it's a beautiful color sand, a real rusty color. So it's a bit unique to Adelaide. There's nowhere else, and it's unique to probably there's 3 courses here, and Grange is my closest course, but it's a grey colour sand, so not far away it changes colour. Whereas here we're still the orange colour. Kooyonga's orange, and so is Glenelg. But Grange, being closest to us, it turns orange. It turns grey there. So orangey sand on the sand dunes, and we've tried to expose in the last 10 years, expose as much of that sand as possible, so that we just want to really show it off, so show the sand dunes off rather than having this covered in grass and vegetation. So back in the 30s, I would have been 30s and 40s back, but they would have planted all the pine trees. So we have a huge amount of pine trees through the course, less now than there was, but there's a couple of different varieties. That's Halopensis, which we class as a weed, and there's also Panasta, which is what the one we encourage to keep, and we spend a lot of time pruning and trimming those and keeping them under control. So, but we have them sporadic, so they're in big copse of trees. We don't have them everywhere. We have them in big patches, and then have a lot of open grass. And we've lost a few trees over the years and removed a few trees, and at no point has any member said, "Yeah, it's a shame that tree's gone." They keep saying, "Hey, we need to pull some more of those out," because they just start to overpower the whole in some spots. But and then where the trees aren't, where they're in the linksy area, it's just very grassy, very grassland. It changes seasonally. Winter, spring's a lot different than it is from summer to autumn. It's quite a different contrast in the style and the look of the place. And then in the sand dunes, we try and encourage as much of the native flora with, little creepers and bushes and grasses without being too much. And they don't grow rapidly because it's so dry. You can dig a hole in a sand dune and it's just, bone dry. So they survive, but they don't overpopulate. It looks really cool having the contrast between the grassy low-lying areas and then the sandy dunal parts that go through the course.
I recall passing through the rotunda, which is the facilities area out in the golf course in and around the 7th and the 8th, I think, if I'm remembering it properly, up on the top of the hill, and was alarmed, not surprised, but alarmed to see a snake bite kit there in the rotunda. Presumably there are some snakes about.
Yes. Lots.
They're probably more frightened of people than people actually think. But
yeah, absolutely.
Because the trick is not to go to snake, I believe.
No, that's because they're eastern browns, which are about the second or third deadliest. So eastern brown snakes they're quite they'll keep away, but if you wind them up or get too close, then they'll be prepared to have a go at you. So, but not very often. If they bite, not very often do you get venom, but you don't want to risk it. So there's lots of members that love them. Lots of members are really frightened by them. So the old rule is just make some noise. They are scared. They'll try and move away. So we try and make as much noise as we can. If we're doing a job, keep the noise up, get them moving. They'll move into the rough. And someone sees them and says, "Oh, there's a snake out there," and you probably think, "Well, you've probably passed 10 of them, but you didn't see them, so you only see the ones that are on the fairway." It's really interesting seeing them on the fairway. They're beautiful because the fairways are, short cut grass and then nice and green, and then the beautiful brown snakes are, scooting across the top of them. So lots of them, but also lots of lizards, blue tongues, and bearded dragons, and lots of other small animals like that. Nothing else of significance. So don't have any kangaroos, don't have any wallabies or koalas or anything. It's just a lot of the reptile stuff we have in the course and birds.
You mentioned land sales as a recurring theme from a historical perspective.
Yeah.
Needless to say, it probably might have been nice to have some access to some additional development land these days. Yeah.
But I think that's every golf club's dream. I think every golf club over the years would have had parcels of land that, and then just sold it off as they needed to pay something off or do a development and use some of that land, thinking that they'd never, thinking you would imagine what the land they've sold off, what that's worth now. The club would be future-proof for the rest of its life, but it's just typical of golf clubs. They think it's the best decision at that point, and they sell it. And there's been obviously a lot of development over the last 80 years, getting close. We were with the photos of back in the 30s. There was the golf course and nothing around it, but now then it just gradually got closer and closer, and then just developed around it. And I'm not sure whether it was all just sold off through choice. I think some that may have been forced upon them. But that's the decision made back in the day. And at that point, it was probably the right decision. But if you think about it now, I think no club in their right mind would sell off land now without getting something for it that would make it, either more land somewhere else or whatever it might be. So, anyway, you can sort of see where some of it was, and we're not tight in the golf course, but it'd be great to be able to have more land to have. There's a lot of other stuff happening these days with little short courses and par 3 courses, and the shed facilities start getting bigger because more machinery, more staff, all that stuff starts to happen, and you start to get a bit squeezed for space. It's tough.
So if we look maybe now at the design heritage and history of the place, so Cargie Rymel, often associated with Kooyunga that you mentioned there. Hello, John Corbett, if you're listening. And Royal Adelaide Club Secretary C.L. Gardner laid out the first rudimentary course at Seaton in 1905. Subsequently, a who's who of both Australian and international design ability have been involved in various different guises. So Dan Souter, Dr. Alistair Mackenzie, Sloane Morpeth, Thompson and Woolveridge, Mike Clayton Golf Design, and most recently Renaissance Golf Design, who are your current consulting architects. Obviously, they were all involved in tweaking and revising and working for the benefit of members. We will get back to your current architects in a little while, but I'd like to linger on a certain visit in 1926 by a certain Alistair Mackenzie. I believe he had 2 servings of Royal Adelaide, one on his way to Melbourne and one on the way back. Yeah. And like any good Scotsman, he insisted on immediate settlement of his fee of £250.
Yes.
He walked the course and said he would be back, and a 3-day visit ensued. I believe the brief predominantly was to minimise the train line crossings, better utilization of the dunescape. And not all of his recommendations were adopted. However, the third, the fourth, and the 11th. So the third would be that famous short par 4 of about 290 yards. The fourth then obviously runs in the opposite direction out to the trees, which I actually, funnily enough, the first time I played it, I birdied it with Tony Christie's clubs. That's a different story altogether. Feckers in Cathay Pacific didn't ship my clubs from London first time round. Anyway, I forgive them. And the crater hole, your 11th, which is actually in the picture behind me. It's Gary Lisbon. So not all of, as I said, not all of Mackenzie's ideas were implemented. In fact, I understand from reading the Centenary book from 1992 that at least a handful of the membership were somewhat less than enamoured with the Dr. Mackenzie-inspired changes.
Yep.
The good doctor's advent in Adelaide being described as unfortunate, to say the least. History might tell us a different story, though, Nathan.
Yeah, absolutely. You wonder what it would be like if they had adopted all of his plans. And some of the tee positions I've seen that he'd had in the plan are pretty out there. But the holes that he did have work on are the holes that we all talk about. They're the holes that we're renowned for. So it was before he turned up the course. They did, I think, probably because it's so hot and arid over here, building a golf course in the sand and those sand dunes. Maybe they thought back in the day that it's too difficult to get grass to grow because it would have been a nightmare in summer. So maybe they went all the way around the sand dune, but didn't use the sand dune to its best advantage. And when Mackenzie got involved, he changed some of the holes and really pushed some of those holes into the sand and really changed it all. And some of the photos we've got from the 30s when late 20s when he was here is crazy. Just the sand. We've got an old black and white footage from the 1932, I think it is, or 36 Open, and it's just a sand pit up there. There's very few trees in sight, and it's just patches of grass, and that's about it. So it's a pretty amazing bit of footage that we have now. But yeah, for I think, as I said, unfortunately, they probably didn't adopt all of it, but it's a great mixture of the stuff that he did. And it's quite quirky. There's a lot of holes that are quite unique to here, and I reckon that having all those guys have a little bit involvement creates that quirkiness and creates that difference to other clubs. A lot of holes that some blind tee shots or some fairways that stop before you got to hit it over the approach to get to the green, or obviously the train line, but just some little quirky things that happen. And I just think having those guys all involved makes the course still has the same feel, but it has a difference. Each hole's a bit different to the next. There's very, very few replication, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, one thing that struck me when I was there is Royal Adelaide's Mackenzie heritage and identity appears to be a central pillar to the continuing story of the Royal Adelaide Golf Club. I'm just wondering, has this always been the case from a historical and evolutionary perspective? Obviously, back in the day, there was certainly some disaffected or disapproving members in the early days, but is that something that sort of has developed over time, or is it a relatively new phenomena, shall we say?
No, I think it's been around for as long as everyone's spoken about it. I don't know what it was like back in the 70s, but as golf course architecture's become a real thing and there's a lot of obsession about it, that's when we can start to that's where people and clubs start to recognise whether they're part of the Mackenzie stable or not. So I think maybe in the 50s and 60s it wasn't discussed so much, but as it's gone on, I think definitely the club really holds that close to their heart, that they are a Mackenzie course and that Mackenzie's been involved and he was here. And, there's a lot of some documentation and some wording that he put together about how impressed he is by the site and compared it to some of the best he'd seen through the UK and just the inland links feel. So I think the club, as I said, maybe back in the day, back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, not so much because it wasn't about that. It was just that playability. But as golf's gone on, it really becomes a selling point, or we can hang your hat on it that, whoever the designer is, you can hang your hat on. I think having the Mackenzie is a big thing for the club, definitely. So, we are still trying to maintain as much of that as we can. And even with the new designers, making sure that it isn't a Renaissance design golf club, Renaissance, and making sure they're retaining Royal Adelaide. They're just fixing or improving the poorest bits. That's what they're trying to do. So I think that's what good designers do. We're not rebuilding the place, but I think, we definitely want to keep hold of the Mackenzie, and we're not looking to pull it apart and change it to something else.
Friend of the pod and world-renowned Mackenzie expert Neil Crafter is an Adelaide resident. At this point in time, it would be remiss of me not to mention his new publication, which details all of Dr. Mac's writings. The book is published by Ryan Publishing. Interested parties can find a link to the publisher in the show notes. Listen, as we move on, we've already mentioned the likes of Sloan Morpeth, Thompson and Woolridge and Mike Clayton Golf Design were all involved in revising and improving the course. Some of these changes were received more favourably than others. But since 2012, Royal Adelaide has counted Tom Doak and Renaissance Golf Design as retained consulting architects. I understand, first of all, that Brian Slonick is your point man design consultant at Renaissance.
So Brian's been with us, since the 2012-13 when they come over, and the club parted ways with Mike Clayton and then engaged Tom Doak. And we were really after, we didn't want to, the course has had such a good standing in Australian golf and world golf for such a long time. The opinion was we didn't want to change it. We're not looking to blow it up and rebuild it. We just want to find the weakest bits and tweak those and get them to where they need to be to replicate the rest of the course, to be as good as the rest of the course. And Tom Doak didn't turn up and try to sell himself to us. Club approached him and he came out and gave his opinion on what he think we could do and wanted to know what the club wanted out of it. And the club's committee at the time and the stakeholders sort of gave the opinion that we just want to be the best we can be. With the parcel of land we have, we want the most out of it. And there's some clubs that get that. Some clubs, places like Kingston Heath, they squeeze 100% out of that site, and it's an incredible golf course. And that's what we want to do, the same thing. We want to get the best out of the golf course we can. So Renaissance were really keen to help us in that. And Brian Slonick was he's a part of the team from Doak, and he comes out now independently, comes out from with Renaissance, but he comes out wholly and solely, which is great. He's a machine operator as well, so he gets on the digger. He's not just pointing and encouraging. He's on the machine and shaping it, and we just come through behind and finish it off. So it's been really good. That the stuff we've had done with Brian has been excellent. It's all been really well received. Everyone's got an opinion, and it doesn't matter whether you paint your house white. Some will turn in and probably tell you it needs to be a different color white, but there's always something someone's going to pick. But as a whole, all the work they've done has been really well received, and it's been subtle. And I'm not sure if you played here 12 years ago compared to now, you may think there's something's changed, but you're not really sure what it is. Hasn't been a big dramatic alteration or change. So that's what we want. We don't want to change the feel of the place, or we don't want to change how it's the soul of it. We just want to improve those areas, and that's what Renaissance are very, very good at. Subtle stuff that it's improving it, and without being a big, massive wholesale change.
Yeah, that's one of the things that struck me when I was there in 2020, just the general philosophy or iterative improvement process that a lot of clubs have embraced, as opposed to saying, well, just leave it alone. Like, why do you want to do anything to it? You know, that you're quite objective as opposed to subjective in relation to assessing what needs to be done. And look, you know, as with all human activity, you're not going to get it right every single time, but the direction of travel is an attempt to make things better. And I guess it's only when you shoot for the stars that you it's only when you shoot for excellence that you pass really good kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if I think back through, tier one courses, actually something else that struck me is, and maybe it was just the people I was meeting, but I think there's across the board with the people I've met and engaged with, there's a slightly better golfing IQ in Australia, I think. And that's not meant as any criticism of anywhere else, but to what I encountered previously, there's a quiet confidence, as I said, driven by history and heritage and knowledge. And it was striking, I mean, sort of thinking of developments that were either finished or ongoing or in the plans when I was there. Peninsula Kingswood, I think, was finished. Boogle Run was obviously in development. The Furrows was an idea in Kingston Heath. Yarra Yarra have obviously got Brian in to do work there with Renaissance. Commonwealth, I think he did that as well. Concord may have been Brian, it may have been Tom.
Brian.
To Sydney. Royal Sydney are obviously, we're going through the planning process. They finally Gil and Gil Hansen, the lads have finally got cracking there. 7 Mile Beach was a figment of Matt Goggins' imagination. The Gunnamatta at the National had just been finished, etc., 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 including Newcastle, Long Island, and whatever. They've all started, finished, or planning a significant courseworks or augmentation. As I said, continuous improvement of the course and facilities seems to be ingrained in the culture and ethos of golf courses in Australia, particularly in terms of Tier 1. So I guess it would appear that you're not keen to rest on your laurels. The competitive set drives actually, to a certain degree, trying to keep up with the Joneses, but it's about, I guess, pushing the envelope full stop across the board and that healthy competition. In terms of RA, as you say, you're striving for the best version possible. And I guess, how do you, I suppose you're so far into that strategy now that any inertia or fear or perhaps ignorance or paranoia or a desire for just relax, just stop doing stuff, that's kind of gone by the wayside, which is very much, I guess, something perhaps that affects other clubs in other countries that maybe have maybe engaged in improvement practices, but maybe gone in not the wrong direction, but obviously trends change and long, hard, tough championship tests are perhaps a thing of the 60s and 70s from the States, and that perhaps was pervaded into the noughties. And I'm more thinking about courses in Europe and UK and Ireland. What would you say to anyone out there listening that in terms of the strategy that you guys, which works for you obviously,
yep,
but in terms of that continuous improvement process in relation to your golf course, what benefits accrue to Royal Adelaide in relation to the practices that you adopt in terms of improvement?
I think for us, it's really a lot of clubs back in. It was definitely the 70s and 80s where people were chasing championship, chasing length, chasing, and we had some work done here in the 80s and 90s with Thompson Woolbridge, where big bunkers were put in and length was put on the course. And if wherever the pros hit the ball, let's put a bunker there, and they put big bunkers out of the ground, and nothing looked right, but it was just all about championship. And I think Tom's very good, and Tom and Renaissance are very good at realizing that championship golf course is great, but they don't pay bills, that they don't encourage membership. You want members to enjoy a members golf club. And here we are trying to do all this work here now. It's a bit of a balancing act because we still want to have tournaments. When we can get an opportunity to have a tournament, professional event, we want to make sure that we have the ability, but also we understand that our members aren't all hitting off 7. They're all hitting up probably an average handicap of, probably 20. And they're all between, the average age of 60, 65, that we want to encourage them and them to enjoy golf. So we're trying to do works that creates enjoyment for everyone, but also be able to have that challenge of a championship course. So we've gained so much short grass, and we've gained space and width of areas that makes the course feel more open and playable, but by no means does it make it easier. Brian and Tom's philosophy is shortcut grass is one of the best hazards in golf. It really changes your mindset when you're standing on a tee or you stand hitting into a green and there's all shortcut grass. You feel relaxed, and it doesn't mean if you hit your shot in and you're short or long or left or right, doesn't mean it's any easier. Just means you've got a different shot. You've got to play now to get onto the green. So there's a bit of that happening, and I think we're really strong on not changing the direction we're going. The club's been heading in the same direction for the last 120 odd years. The course has been going for 120, the course here, 120 years, just continuing to move forward and not change what we're trying to do. There's been trees planted over the years and we're reducing some of those, but it's the same style, the same feel that it was back in the 20s and 30s and 40s to what we have now. We're trying to, even go back to some of that stuff, look at some of the old photos and replicate some of those things. And Brian's really keen to look at some of that and look at some of the old drains or whatever they are around the place to try and encourage the old traditional feel. And that's what we're really strong on. We don't want to be a new course that's newly presents differently. We want to present like it did back in the day. Trying to be as good as we can, but still present it as a traditional club. That's what we're trying to do.
So consistency is important. I'm just wondering in terms of your ongoing relationship with Renaissance. I'm assuming there's a wider plan, or you're working to some sort of, well, we'll which is as much about what not to do as to what to do. So just it's not a sort of year by year. How best to explain this? I'm just wondering in terms of the trust that you have in the expertise that you've, I guess, contracted or partnered with since 2012.
Yep.
How important do you think, the suspension of disbelief is to a certain degree, to actually understand that obviously you as a superintendent have a knowledge base about the site, but obviously from the perspective of Brian and the Renaissance team, I think people often misunderstand the fact that it's a lifelong journey for those guys in terms of design and seeing stuff, and they've seen and considered stuff that we'll never as ordinary golfers understand or fully understand, maybe because they've just taken the time. Now it's fair enough. On the flip side of that coin, anyone can call themselves a golf course architect. It doesn't mean that they are.
Yes.
but the track record and the expertise and the golfing IQ, and these guys, certainly many of them are at the top of their game, and they've almost encyclopedia like minds for the holes they've seen and the strategy inherent in those holes.
Yeah.
And it's about, I guess, transposing that and being sympathetic to the particular site they're working on. Does that question make any sense?
Yeah, and I think so. But they are very good at just so when they turned up, they did small stuff initially, and they sort of gained the club's confidence. And now it's not about us telling them what we think. They come to us and say, we think this is the next apple to pick, and this is the stuff that we can do that continues to get bang for buck and small changes and continues to flow along. So they are. Brian, there's no plans. They don't turn up and say, here's a beautiful plan to display. They just turn up, and we just did the 10th hole in November, and Brian said, we're going to improve the 10th green gates and pin positions, maybe widen the 10th fairway, and we'll change the ladies' tee. And that was the extent of the knowledge of what we were doing. And we turned up and away went. And he just, dug a new bunker and moved the tee and widened the fairway and changed the green and extended shortcut grass. But we leave him to it because we have trust in him. And, we employ him to be our designer, and my belief is we don't need to interfere with him and tell him how to do it, because it's not what you want. You want him to be able to have complete autonomy in that. Go for it, get it done, and we'll come through. And by all means, Brian is very good at including us to say, hey, what do you think about this, or where's the predominant wind, or all that stuff comes on board. But for them, it's about how there's lots of things. I watched a video the other day, and Tom Doak, and he talks about the distances are a little bit irrelevant to him. It's about how it looks, how it's going to play, different directions hitting the ball, which way the wind comes from, all the bits and pieces that come along with it. But people think, the par 3 should be X distance, and a par short 5 should be X amount of distance. Tom's like, I don't get caught up in it. I don't get caught up in that stuff. It's about how it's going to play for a golfer and where it sits. So Brian's very, very good at just including all of us, but also help directing the club on which bit's next, or what he thinks we can do to improve a hole. And some of the things he'll do is literally, he might lift a bunker lip by half a foot just to hide the distance between the green and the bunker, or he might put a mound at the back of a green to disguise a path that leads off, so you don't have that noise around a path that's all clean and protected. So little tiny things they do. You often think, why are we doing this bit? And then it becomes apparent later on, or joining a surround in with a green edge, so you feel like you got all this space, and you get up and realize you haven't got much space because it's the drop off behind it. But you don't see that from the tee. There's a lot of that happening as well. So we just leave them to it, and they give us feedback on what we think we should do moving forward, rather than us controlling what they do and where they want to go next, which is really good.
You've enjoyed the period working with them, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, Brian's excellent. He's and as I said, he's not elusive. He gets involved. He always wants to have a chat, and he's turns up. When he turns up, he goes for it. He gets on the machines. He's driving the excavator. He gets on the bulldozer, whatever he needs to do. He'll jump on the dump truck. He'll do his thing. So it's great having someone like that doing it, because it must be very difficult for designers that don't operate machines to be able to dictate what needs to be done, unless they bring their own crew out, but we're only doing small things at a time. So we haven't done big whole changes. A lot of it's just been snippets here and there and joining of fairways and whatever it is. But Brian's really good and he listens to stuff. So if I have a suggestion, if he likes it, he'll bring it up and say, hey, how about we do this? So he's really good at backing me or coming up with ideas or explaining why we're doing it. And the club, the committee have faith in him, and the club does as well. I am 100% sure the club, all the membership have faith in him. As I said, some members will have a different of opinion, but that's always going to happen. You're never going to, if you leave something alone, don't touch it. People want you to change it possibly, but then you change it and then people think, why did you change it? So you're always going to have that clash at some point, but by the whole, membership's very, very comfortable in what he does and how he goes about it.
I guess it's that 80-20 rule. You can't keep everybody happy all the time. So not that you shouldn't try to explain yourself, but ultimately in a club situation, in a democratic club situation anyway, majority rules, I suppose. Come here to me. I'm just wondering about if we could talk a little bit about the vegetation on site. Obviously, you gave us a brief intro a few minutes back. Grass varietals, management and presentation. Now, if I'm right, I think your greens are predominantly bent, a couple of different strains, Santa Ana Cooch fairways, which would be Bermuda type fairways for our North American listeners. And your roughs, are they predominantly Santa Ana as well, or what are the roughs?
So the fairways have Santa Ana in them, but they are just a common cooch. So whatever, we can cut areas down now and it will grow and turn into fairway if we want to. So the greens are a mixture of G2, Pencross, Highland and Seaside. So some old bent grasses in there, and they're planted back in sort of 06, 07, 08 in that period. And that was to try and we wanted to replicate the old feel, different the motley look in the green. So they were, so that's what they are. And obviously there's power in them as well, but that's the majority of them are those four variety of bent. All the other surfaces, all the shortcut surfaces are cooch grass or Bermuda grass. And some of those parts are hybrid, so the Santa Ana, but majority of it is common cooch. Whatever just used to be called Summerton cooch. There's all different variations you play on here during certain times of year. There's all these different not colors, but different textures and different green patches, different color greens through the fairways. And I think that really keeps with the traditional feel that we're going for. Our roughs do have cooch grass all through the rough, but it's predominantly just cool season grasses, and a lot of it's weeds, as in barley grass and wild oats and brome grass. Then you'll have native stuff in there as well in the low-lying links area. So we get that membership get a bit irate. They're getting used to it now. When the first couple of years I did it, they were pretty upset by it, but we let the rough get as long as it likes to get. So some of it could be, 1.5 foot, 2 foot tall in patches. But then as soon as it dries off in end of September, October, it looks amazing because it all goes golden. Then it blows in the wind like your typical links style windswept, grassy golf course. And then you move up into the sand dunes, which then exposes the sand. We have a lot of native creepers and little bushes up there that sort of hold some of the sand together. So we removed a lot of weed grasses through the sand dune back in 2012 and 13. A plant called belt grass, which is a South African plant. We just pulled it out by hand to get rid of it. So it does contrast, and we're a bit different to most golf clubs. We're different from every season. So instead of being just green fairways and shortcut rough, we have, during winter, we get the rough greens up, and then by spring, it's pretty thick and brutal. And then by the end of spring into summer, it starts to go golden. And by the end of summer, it started to fall apart and thin out. And by this time of year, it's thin. Hit your ball wherever you like and you can find it again. So the course narrows up and becomes narrow or wide, short and long, depending on the season, depending on when you're here. So that's a bit unusual for a lot of clubs. A lot of clubs, it doesn't matter whether you turn up in June or December, they play the same. They may play a bit differently on the turf surface, may play a bit differently, but the rough's the same. Whereas we do fluctuate depending on the time of year. And we're a bit unique in Adelaide and probably a little bit unique in the country as well. In Australia, there's not many other clubs that do it, I don't think. People may look at the rough and go, oh my God, that's brutal. But it is what it is, and the membership accept it. We we cut rough back where we need to, if it's where all the golfers get to it. But if you hit the ball wide off the fairway, you're probably going to have to reload. No doubt you'll probably find 2 balls while you're looking for yours, but that's golf. We need penalties out there. Otherwise, if it was all shortcut grass, because it's a links course, you hit the ball as far as you like, and as wide as you like, you'll be able to find it and hit it again. So we try and make it a bit tougher in that sense. So the vegetation is really a lot of just the grasses in the links, the flat lying area, and the sand dune, trying to encourage the native vegetation. A lot of little grass clumps or native creepers or little bushes that whatever grow up there. We're trying to encourage that as much as we can in the native sandy areas. So it is, it does change throughout the course as you go around. It's not the same on every hole.
And I believe you have a hard irrigation edge sprinkler system. Obviously, sprinklers focused inwards. So what that essentially means is, from a rough perspective, you're not actually watering the rough on purpose.
Nope.
So essentially, whatever it sucks out of the ground, it sucks out of the ground. Yep. And then over time, it grows, and then the sun comes along and it basically bakes it and burns it off.
Yep.
And you get that contrast, which is just so wonderful. Which I remember vividly in January 2020. It's just, the contrast is just. Now, admittedly, you had the old lady looking pretty sweet, obviously with the Australian Women's Open upcoming, so the 10 days later. Yeah. Thanks for those funky pin positions, by the way.
Yeah. You're saving all the cool ones for the tournament. It is. So we do have hard edge sprinklers, and that was put in back in 2009. And when it got there, they were all in, but the fairways weren't in line with the sprinklers as much. So we spent a lot of effort the year later just getting them all sharpened up. And since then, we spent a lot of time making sure those edges are on where they need to be, and the fairways are only getting water where they do get water. So it's really important that we only water anything that's watered, we cut shortcut. Anything that's not watered, we let it do its thing. So we don't want to have green lush grass anywhere. If it is, we cut it short, and we're really strong on that around greens. We try and cut as much as we can around the greens now, and make it so that it's all shortcut grass wherever the water hits. And if it does hit, if we can't cut it short, then we've put new little small sprays in those areas to try and reduce the amount of overspray where we can, where it's feasible. Sometimes it's not, but most of the time we get it pretty good.
Maybe we could take a look at sort of ecology and ecological husbandry on the site. Sustainability is obviously a watchword that all golf courses need to embrace these days.
Yeah.
As you're probably aware, there's significant chemical phase out in evidence in Europe. I'm just wondering what the experience for Australian greenkeepers is like, and if it's similar, how that has affected your ability to tackle the likes of disease, pests, or other periodic challenges such as worm casts.
It's not such an issue here compared to what it is like overseas, but I know I was over in Europe last year and through UK and down into France, very limited with fungicides. I think they only have one insecticide they could use, and I think the guys in France are telling me they've only got a couple of years left of fungicides, and then that gets phased out. So that's going to be a difficult time for them. So for us, we still have the majority of the chemicals available. Each state over here is a little bit different. So in SA, we can only ever use turf-registered products, and so it has to be turf-registered, otherwise it's illegal for us to use it. Other states, they can use whatever they like, but they just have no repercussion. If something goes wrong and they kill turf, there's no repercussion because it's not registered in turf. So, but we're a bit different. So we are limited with what we can use, and there's no new chemistry coming out. So they're rehashing old products and mixing together, but what we find here in particular at RA is we're finding it difficult to control POA. We put out pre-emergence and post-emergence and having less and less effect on it. So we're starting to change our philosophy a bit with that and what we do moving forward, but it's becoming harder and harder, and it becomes Australia's got a really strong expectation of purity. If you haven't got pure fairways or pure greens, then it's not good enough. You're not doing your job, and people lose their jobs over it, but also a lot of people lose greens over it. There's been lots of greens over the years that have died because of chemical applications that too strong, getting too hot, the rates are too high, whatever it might be to try and control POA. And there's no real silver bullet. There's some really good ones now, but there is no real silver bullet for greens. And even for us now, it's fairways are the same. we just have such a hard time trying to control the power, both pre-emergent and post-emergent. So I think in time, we follow Europe and the UK with a lot of things. I reckon in time we will start to slow down with some of the chemicals. There has been ones that have phased out that we can't get, but we haven't had a huge, has it impacted us hugely? But I think it will start to. And we need to be careful that we need to be on the front foot and thinking about how we're going to be able to get around that before it happens. See, that they just don't want to turn it off, and then we've got to scramble to try and find something. We need to be on the front foot. So there is definitely, for us, we've changed our philosophy, which has helped us have better turf quality during the winter, and probably with worm castings as well. You know, as an education process that we went through with the members, we have lots of worm castings, and during the winter we're quite wet and muddy on a wet year, and the worms get really bad, the worm castings. But we spoke to the membership, or I spoke to particularly the ladies members, and mentioned that, you know, I don't think Royal Adelaide should be in the business of killing worms, you know, and they were all of the opinion that, yeah, well, why would you kill them? I said, well, I can't have worm castings with I can't ask the worms to stop putting worm castings up. That's not how it goes. So we need to be careful of that. So they all agreed. Now they all love this when there's worm castings. They all think, oh, this is great. We got great soil. There's worms in there, and they're doing their thing. So they feel now that it's a positive rather than being this big negative that we have worm castings. We have rules when we need to for lift, clean, and replace. It's a bit unsightly, but it is what it is. You know, we're a natural turf facility in the environment that we've sort of moved away from just using harsh chemicals and controlling everything. So we've changed our philosophy a bit, both the use of chemicals, but also the way we're trying to educate the members and get them to understand that some worm castings are okay. You know, it's not ideal, but it's not life or death. It's not a big deal. In the scheme of things, that's okay. So we have changed it a bit, but I think currently it's Australia's still got a suite of chemicals they can use, but I think it will start to change in time. And the chemicals we are using now these days are very safe. They're so specific to the disease or the insecticide. Back in the old days, you know, you'd go with a broad spectrum insecticide and wipe everything out. But these days, it's so specific to the pest we're dealing with. It's so much better than it has been. But I think it will start to get tighter and tighter as time goes on. As you guys would know overseas, I'm sure in Scotland and Ireland, with the same sort of scenario, because it was in England.
Yeah, obviously in Ireland we're under EU rules, which obviously the UK, not being an EU member anymore, are not. But the one country that comes to mind that I've spent some time in recently, last year, was the Netherlands, and they've actually gone beyond the requirements of EU directives and regulations, and they're pretty much using nothing.
Yeah.
So they've actually dispensed with everything as natural, almost, shall we say. So as a result, they are at the vagaries to a certain degree of weather and whatever else. They're using natural fertilizers, as in they're redistributing their clippings and where necessary. They do have a couple of things that they use, but it's basically they just bit the bullet a number of years ago through the Dutch Golf Federation, and they've all signed up to it, and that's the way it is. So member expectations have been, they're still there, but they have been modified somewhat. Again, can't keep everybody happy all the time, but you know, to be honest with you, what I saw was still perfectly acceptable.
Okay.
Mike Clayton has that line, which is perfect turf and turf perfect for golf, are two completely different things.
Absolutely.
And you know, we get that Augusta effect this time of year, which I'm sure you are no more or no less immune from than our own greenkeeping team in Royal Dublin. But it's just about knowing that certainly from our perspective, the wind is changing down the tracks, and golfers have to be aware of that and be more accepting and understand that it's actually not man over nature. It's actually in harmony with nature, and trying to minimize that footprint and be a little bit more sustainable across the board in so many different areas.
Yeah, and I think it's really, you hit the nail on the head before, it's really about member and golfer expectation. You know, in Australia, as I said before, we're really, really hooked on purity and how you can't have power. Power's bad. Power's, it's our enemy, and everyone fights really hard to get rid of it. But you go over to Scotland, and when I was over in Scotland and England, and it was whatever grew. Just prepare the surface. If the surface is a good surface, doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's a good surface. And I think that's the philosophy we all need to continue to work on, because if we continue to try and be, as I said, all about purity, and some golf clubs have poorer greens for it because they're so hell-bent on getting rid of the power, the greens are continuously under pressure and suffering from it. So it's that balancing act of, let's just prepare the surface, provide a surface first. If we can control the power or have them pure, then great. But I think surface presentation is first, and then the other stuff should follow along. So it's just that expectation that golfers probably need to realize that they it's not unachievable. It's achievable, but it comes at a big cost, both financially and probably environmentally as well.
But it's funny, you're just echoing what Leo Barber from Paraparuma said to me recently in relation to surface. That's what he's focused on in terms of presenting the sports turf surface. And we got to remember also that Poa or Kentucky bluegrass or whatever it's called in other locations, it's in the air, it's endemic in 6 of the 7 continents. It's a hardy little bastard, and better to live with it to a certain degree than trying to eradicate it, because you'll never get rid of it.
No. And not with apart from the cost of labor, ham weeding and hand plugging and all the stuff that goes along with it. It's clubs do it, which is amazing. They can afford to do it, or they want to do that they want to present that way. That's great. But I just think sometimes that there has to be a feasibility. There has to be something we need to look at. Is that really justifiable to spend that amount of money or chemicals on that? So I think there is a way that there's a bit of a balancing act moving forward with how that works. Definitely.
Yeah. Listen, what can you tell me about the yellow sedge skipper butterfly reintroduction?
So we had there's an endangered little butterfly in Adelaide. Hasn't been here for many, many years, and it's on the other York, one of the peninsulas further across from us that they've found some of it. So there's a hedge that grows the source sedge that grows it's called Garnia, that grows in the wetlands, and we've got lots of it here. So they've actually bred these little sedge skippers up and brought them in and released them here to try and encourage them back into the Adelaide plains through here through the city pretty much, or through the built area. So we've got a lot of that plant here. Other clubs, Grange and Glenelg and Kooyonga, have all got them as well, but we've got some remnant stuff. So I've done a release here, and then as those other courses get some more of those rushes growing, they'll start to release them there as well, they're hoping. So it's a really cool story to have. Some people are so passionate about these little butterflies are so small and so fast, you can't see them, but they're really into it. And we've had some release, and you're trying to get a photo of it and the thing disappears before you can get a photo. But and they have seen some breeding activity here since they've released them, which is great. So we've planted more and more of this reed this plant through our natural wetlands to try and encourage more of it. They're a slow growing plant, but yeah, it's really cool, really good feel good story having those sort of things released on site. I think a lot of people think that golf clubs are environmental vandals, and we just, rape the environment and all take. And I think they forget that what we actually give back to the environment and how we sustain some of that. And I think that's it's a good little story that we should probably promote more, that this is the sort of stuff golf clubs are able to do by having the area and the size and the vegetation that we have in here. If it wasn't for us, there'd been another 2,000-3,000 houses here and terracotta roofs and roads everywhere. So because we're here, it creates an environment that sort of stuff can happen, which I think is pretty special.
You hit the nail on the head there in terms of communicating externally. We tend to be a bit inward looking. We tend to talk to each other within the golf industry. And as a result of that, there's misunderstanding out there. There's lazy stereotypes used and whatever else. So the more interaction and engagement that golf can have locally in the community, the better. In terms of developing those relationships, but also passing on knowledge and being seen as a responsible stakeholder, if you like, from an environmental perspective.
Yeah, I think, and we probably don't do enough of it where we promote what we do in the environment. We don't go to our neighbours and the community and showcase what we do. We don't do enough of that. And I think every club's the same. We probably could be better at. Some clubs are better than others, but being able to promote that to to schools, but also to community groups, and maybe get them in to have a look at the wetlands, have a look at the vegetation, whatever it is. golf clubs as a whole, and all sporting facilities probably don't do it well enough. And I think we could be better at promoting what we do. I think it has changed a bit. 20 years ago, people, we waste water and it's all bad, bad, bad. But I think people are realizing now it's not as bad as they used to think, but we could be better at promoting what we do and how we go about it. I think that's a really good thing that we can be promoting, and people from the outside that aren't golfers can see us differently, rather than thinking we're just elitist people playing golf on grass that uses up all this water and chemical. It's a bit different than that.
Absolutely. Talking about grass, I understand that some of your bent grass varietals in the greens at Royal Adelaide are now discontinued, or certainly difficult to get.
Yes.
When I was there in January 2020, I think you had a number of trial greens in the practice chipping areas sown with some newer bent strains. Just wondering how that went. And has it led to any utilisation of any new seed varieties from an overseeding perspective?
It has, yes. So we built our 10th green, as I said, in November. We always knew something was going to come along at some point where we had to rebuild greens. So the 4 varieties we have, of those 4, they're pretty much all 4 non-existent. So Highlands you can't get. All the Gs have gone. So G2's gone. Seaside has gone. And Pencross. We can get a little bit of Pencross every so often, but it's really difficult to get hold of. So in that trial green about 5 years ago, we put in some different variation. We put in 007 and Pure Distinction and the A's, A1 and A4, and then what we had left of our current stock. So we did that just to see how that all worked out and how it went. Really interesting results, because you can see the difference clearly of the new varieties compared to the older varieties. But of the newer varieties, the difference between like Pure Distinction and 007, the difference in colour, and Pure Distinction, how dense and tight it was. And I think beautiful surface, but I just don't know whether it's our surface. It looks really, really pure, and it looks really like a billiard table. It's really uniform. And at the club, we don't want that. We specifically gone with 4 varieties, so we have that mottled appearance. Not instantly, but as years go on, they all eventually sort of change back a little bit. So when it comes to the 10th green this year, we've got some Pencross, and then we got a little bit of A4, the last bit of A4 we could get. That's no longer available either. And then we went the one called Dominance Extreme, which has got a 007, 777, and 777 XL, which is a 007 XL, which it's got a 3-way mix. And currently we have 5 varieties in that 10th green. Depending on how that goes over the next little while, we'll probably maybe start to oversow some of the old greens with the newer varieties that we're using to try and blend them all together, so they're all have that newer seed in them as well. Every course is different from one to the next, and I don't think there's any one grass is better than any. There is grass is definitely better than one to the other, but I think you should work out how to maintain that grass. So for us, we don't want the pure look. We want to have that old school, different variations of different colours through the green. And I'm sure the old clubs that have that look in there, it's been created by every year back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. They probably, when they were in a renovation, they would have thrown some bent grass seed out, and then it just would have continuously evolved over time. And I think that's what we may have to go to every couple of years, putting some different variations out there and some different oversowing, just to try and encourage different grass types in there to eventually have that mottled appearance. So it's been a really good trial for us with those varieties, but it's just now they're changing so quickly. People that are picking 007 4 years ago probably can't get 007 anymore. It'll eventually phase out and it'll be 777, and then you can't get that, or that all the A's, the A1s, A2s, A4s, all those, they've all stopped now. So clubs that have got 18 greens of A4, if they have rebuilt a green next year, they can't do it. They've got to put something else in. This is all going to be happening to everyone, really, when you start looking at different, having to replace greens and you can't get the variety that you did use 15 years ago, you're going to be in the same boat. So it's a bit of an interesting conundrum for us, what we're going to do moving forward. And I think that will be oversowing all the other greens.
So I'm assuming the new green on 10 was, did you strip it completely?
Yeah.
And read, yeah. So presumably you seeded that as opposed to sodded?
Yes. It was sodded because we didn't have enough in our nursery. If we used all the turf up on our nursery, then we had nothing in case one of our greens has an issue. So we needed to have some up our sleeve. But we had to, and you never, stripping half a green and then trying to get it to match never works. It never happens. It would always look half and half. So we just had to strip it and then start again. So, because we went bigger, we were never going to have enough turf to lay it back down. So at some point, we're going to have to go a different variety, and we bit the bullet and did it.
So in other words, the 10th is probably still out of play, is it?
No, it's in now. So we did it in November. After about 110 days, we opened it up. So in play within the 3 months. We're back in play.
Oh, to have the growing conditions.
Yeah, it's amazing. We had the grass
sweet.
up in about 4 or 5 days. Was up, germinated, and greened up. So.
Jesus.
Yeah, like she went. So it plays a bit differently. It's a bit firmer than the other greens. Not a lot of organic matter sitting there yet, but that will change as time goes on. And, but again, people will all probably think it looks different only because they know it's a new green. But, someone else turns up, they probably won't know the difference in a couple of years because it will change a bit with the different colours will happen through it with the different varieties in there.
You'll get a laugh at this. We're still struggling with soil temperature and an easterly wind, which obviously wicks the moisture off the surface. And Poa is actually performing quite well at the moment, but the fescue with the long, wet winter just is on life support. It really just needs some warmth and some love. And of course, the members are never happy. It's that recency bias, and they're on that merry-go-round on an annual basis, giving out about the greens first of all because there's no growth. Then with the moisture in the ground and the heat, that strange yellow thing in the sky, they'll start moaning about the rough length. Anyway, it goes on and on. Who to be a superintendent? What?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Everyone's got their issues in their own little patch. It's we're good for one place, they're not good for the next, and vice versa. So it's pretty tough. I don't know, guys there in the cold climate, how they go about getting grass to grow. Sometimes it'd be pretty difficult.
They go out and shout at it. Yeah. Did I do that in Australia? Anyway, in terms of that growing season of yours, obviously Australia is often referred to as the red continent. More than 26 million inhabitants, predominantly located around the coastline, due to the baking heat of the interior. The whole country can be a dry and inhospitable place at times. Yep. And Adelaide is the driest state capital in Australia. So obviously you've got the Goyder's line there between essentially the Barossa Valley where they grow the wine and the desert.
Yep.
That arable land, desert land demarcation. With the aforementioned in mind, the availability of water is both key and was key consideration to Royal Adelaide to enable a sustainable, maintainable and golfable course through the decades. Delving back at the centenary book, I believe the first irrigation bore was drilled in 1914. And by the 1950s, there was 3 functioning bores, which allowed 23,000 gallons of water daily. This obviously facilitated the move from couch fescue greens to pure bent for the first time. Your first automatic sprinkler system was installed in 1978 at a princely sum of 185,000 Australian dollars. Extended in 1986. Extended further in 86 at an additional $120,000. Which obviously facilitated night watering. I'm assuming, first of all, just a nerdy question, which you presumably still irrigate at night because of low temperature and to minimize evaporation and et cetera, et cetera. So I guess all of the above sets the scene perfectly for the next topic of interest, namely the Royal Adelaide Stormwater Project. So during my visit to Royal Adelaide in early 2020, I was very, very interested to hear about the Stormwater Project that the club delivered in response to the Millennium Drought. What can you tell us about this project?
As you said, Australia's really dry, and Adelaide or South Australia, they say it's dry state and the driest continent. So I think we only average, on our site here, we only average 410 millimetres a year. So not a lot of rain for the year, where some, compared to some places. So irrigation water has always been a task for the club, and any golf club needs to have water, otherwise you can't survive. So they had bores over the years. There's been old bores, and some of those bores were only 10 metres deep, 5 metres deep, just to get the groundwater. But the groundwater becomes quite salty certain times of the year. So they obviously invested many years ago putting some deeper bores down, and then in the big drought, the millennial drought back in 0506, whatever, I think it was 0506, it was the bores that we had, which are about 150 metres down, were becoming quite salty. Towards the end of each summer, they'd be getting saltier, which meant that even though we had water, they were struggling with turf growth and the health of the greens, and they were thinning at the end of every summer, disease, pressure from the salt, all that sort of stuff. So I think the salt levels were getting up towards 16 to 1800 parts per million, so pretty high in salt. And then as the summer went on, it would accumulate and so be it. So the club went through, there's government grants going out, and the club went through a feasibility study and worked out they had the ability to collect stormwater and enough space through a certain part of the course where we could run wetlands. So what happens now is there's a large catchment. I don't know the exact size, but I reckon it would be in the vicinity of, it could be 1,000, maybe 500 to 1,000 hectares of housing. It's huge from here to the city. All the water that collects on the roads comes through a massive 3 to 4 foot stormwater pipe through the back of the golf course. So any bit of water that comes down that pipe, we collect and we put it through wetlands. It runs through a wetland system that holds about 10 to 15 megalitres of water. As that water goes through all the reed beds that are all different depths. So there's sections where there's deep water, sections where there's shallow water, but it feeds through the reeds. And the slime that grows around those reeds is what feeds on any nitrogen or any nutrients that are in the water and helps clean it. So as the stormwater goes through the wetlands, it gets to the last point. We have 2 pumps there that push the water back down into our bores, back down 150 metres, and recharge the aquifer. So what we pull out in summer, we push back in winter. So in theory, where it becomes almost an underground storage facility of our stormwater that we push in, and then we pull it back out. So we have an allocation of water from the government. On top of that, it's what we also put down into the ground. So the water we have, we could not use enough of it. As in, we'd have to water all year, every day, to use that amount of water up. We can push anywhere up to 200 meg of water down a year. That's the most we're allowed to put down at once. But we don't ever get to that point because we don't have enough rain to do it. But it's a wonderful system. And what it does enable us to do is, as we're pulling the water out now, we would never get above about 600 parts per million. So it's a whole lot different to the 1,800 we're getting. The 600 parts per million, sometimes it's down to 300 parts per million, but we're pulling that out and it doesn't fluctuate. So by the end of summer, it's still the same amount. So there's still other issues. There's a few bicarbonates and other bits and pieces with the water, but the water quality now is never an issue for us. We never discuss it. It's never a problem. It doesn't accumulate. We don't have problems with salt build-ups or high levels of salt coming out. So I think that's probably the most important thing the club's ever done in its 125 years is create a drought-proof system, which is that stormwater harvesting. By doing that, now even with the government says, hey, it's a drought and we're going to halve your water allocation, they can, but all the water that we've accumulated over the last few years, we still have plenty of water to water our course. So we'll never suffer for a long dry summer, or we'll never suffer again. It's a wonderful system that enables us to have endless amounts of water, but at good quality. And it also helps the environment. All that water that would normally go out into the ocean, or all that stormwater, which is full of grease and rubbish and whatever, we collect that. So as soon as any drop of water goes into a drain somewhere, it comes to us. So we get the first bit of water every time. And what comes with that is all the rubbish that's in there. So every 3 years, we pull out around about 150 tonne of muck. That's everything from needles, tennis balls, leaf litter, more lawn mowing clippings, everything that comes down the stormwater, we collect in our sediment pond, and it's rank when we pump it out. It's disgusting, but we put in it's got a concrete base. Excavators go in, dig it all out, and then we chuck it away, and then we start again. So that's the first pond that the water goes to. So if we didn't have this water infiltration system here, all that water, needles and all, would go to the ocean. So, but people don't get that either. That they're not grasping that we're also helping the environment that way. We're also helping not use as much groundwater by pushing it in, but we're also stopping all that rubbish, contaminants going to the ocean, all the grease and all this, what's on the roads, all the cigarette butts, all that stuff that comes down, it's pretty full on. So it's a really wonderful, ingenious system. We've got one, Grange have got one, and Glenelg have got one. So three of the 4 big clubs have one. And there's other ones that are around the place now that are one near Westlakes Golf Club, which isn't far from here, and they're able to use the water out of it. So it's on some of the golf course and some of the council land. So they work it together, but they sell the water to Westlake. So there's, it's a great facility, and we're just lucky enough to have a stormwater pipe going past that we could grab and use. It's pretty amazing.
That's a great story, man. It's the right thing to do, and obviously gives you guys security and peace of mind in terms of what if scenarios.
Yeah, I think a lot of clubs would be envious of any water supply. And that's one of the big things. There's a lot of golf clubs that have starting to be built, and they have no water and they don't survive, or they can't start because they haven't got a permanent supply. But for us to have a permanent supply, which is our bores, and then now to have the ability to recharge those bores and make sure they're full. And there's also been a big change in industry in this area. So there's been some big players that have pulled out of the aquifer system. It's, as I said, it's 150 metres down. So it's a fair way. We've had, some big Coca-Cola and West End Brewery and some other big players that used a lot of water have pulled out. So then the aquifer's not under so much pressure now, but it still means that we keep pushing the water in there and we can keep it full and we're using it. So we almost become neutral. How much water, what we're pulling out, we're putting back in. We're replacing what we use. And that's another good part of what we do.
Well, I'm sure that's not the only good story that you get to tell the members in Royal Adelaide. I'm just wondering how you go about engaging and communicating with the wider membership.
The club has a few ways. Obviously, there's a newsletter that goes out to members, which is really good. We have little stories in that from course and rules and members and all sorts of stuff. But so we do that. I do some presentations during the year. So there's a few groups that meet once a month on a Saturday or a Thursday, whatever it is. So I do a couple of PowerPoint presentations to those guys. We do once a year. We did it last year. We're going to do it again this year. We did a course walk and then like an environmental walk. So walk the members around through some of the vegetation and talked about some of the plants and what we're trying to do, but then also through the wetlands. And they get really, really excited about the wetlands because they just, they know about it, they know the wetlands, but when you start to tell them how they work and what's involved, but also the benefits for it, they get really excited about that. I think it's they get thrilled that the club's done this and it come at a cost, but what the club reaps from it and what the environment reaps from it's wonderful. So we do a bit of that. We do little presentations and some question and answers and have a lunch and get up and do a presentation. If I've been somewhere or something that's happening, we get up and talk about stuff. That's really good. I think the members want to have a touch and feel rather than just being a newsletter. They want to hear from us and the staff, whether it be myself or golf ops or whatever it might be, some of the junior members or some PGA members, whatever it is. I think it's really important that we get involved with the membership face-to-face rather than just via an email or a newsletter. Most people get a newsletter, they'll flick through it, see the fancy photos and put in the bin. Whereas at least have a dinner, we've done some things where they'll have a member come and talk about something they've done or a golf trip, or me talk about a trip overseas, whatever it is. And at a dinner, they'll come and sit and have dinner and listen to us talk. So it's good. The club's getting better and better at that and promoting the staff they have as well, which is really good. So that's how most of it gets done. Some small stuff via emails, but some bigger stuff via little member dinners or member get-togethers. It's good.
Yeah. I remember seeing an Instagram post from the Royal Adelaide greenkeeping team account mentioning your auxiliary greenkeeping team, made up of some of the members, I believe. I'm just wondering, is it still in operation? And if it is, how do you utilise the resource?
Yeah, it is. So it's, they all, what do you guys call them over in the UK? They call them, I forget now. There's a few terms for them.
Artisans,
that's it. So it's a bit like that. So we have once a month. Our members, probably 20 of them. So it's probably 25, but not all of them turn up every time. But once the first Tuesday of every month, they'll turn up for 2 hours and they'll just do a task that they want us to do. And it's usually things like picking up rubbish around the fence line or picking up pine cones or divoting tees or fairways or just random jobs. Not that we don't get time to do it. It's just that we don't do it. For me to go pick up the pine cones, I'd have to have all my staff all day to do it. Whereas these guys, there's 20 of them turn up. And away they go and they all chat and they have a great time. They have a beer after it in the shed, but they feel like they're a part of the club a bit more. They feel like there's a bit more ownership, but they just want to help out. So it's a really good thing. We benefit from it because we feel like with them, we aren't having to do those small jobs. They benefit from it because they feel like they're a part of helping the club out moving forward. And they also have a good, they all get together and have a beer in the shed. They relax. They'll turn up in their work gear. They're not, not in their golf clothes or in their work gear, having a beer in the lunchroom with some of the staff, stay back and help out and have a beer with them. So that's good. It's a nice thing. I think a lot of clubs do it. A lot of clubs have volunteers. A lot of clubs, that's how they function. But for a club like us, we've never had it before. And as soon as we put the call out, there's a lot of people put their hand up. We limit the numbers. Otherwise, if you had 40 people turn up, it's like trying to herd cats. They just all spread out and do their own thing. So trying to keep them under control is one thing. They're all so eager. They all want to go out and do something. So we're going to try and control them and I'll let them go. But it's a really good thing the members do. And I think it's good the clubs allowed it to happen and then they're able to give something back. I think they really enjoy it. It's funny, picking up the pine cones, the amount of pine cones we get is crazy. And they all put them away, but they all turn up. You see them 2 days later and they can't play because they've got tight hamstrings because they've been bending over picking up pine cones for 2 hours. So they all come up with ingenious ways of raking them into buckets or whatever, so they don't have to bend over as much. But it's a really good group. They're all really nice members that want to get involved and have a chat and want to know what we're doing, how we do it, and it's good. And it's another good way of us giving feedback to them on how we do things, and they spread the word around as well. So it's a good thing the club's done, and it's been received really well. It's been going for maybe 2 or 3 years now. It's been going for a while, so it's good. And we have a barbecue at Christmas. They all turn up for that and have a good time. So yeah, it's great.
I also seem to remember, if memory serves, that their could be a Greens Team Appreciation Day at Royal Adelaide, where the members host a barbie and beer session for you and your team.
Yeah.
If I've got that right, I really do hope that some of those wine industry sorts like Tierney, Muster, et al. Hello, boys. Contribute some grape juice for all.
You might have to get into their ear. Yeah.
The Torbeck label, or indeed Muster's own label, is well worth drinking.
Some good drops, those two, definitely. Yeah. I like Dave Muster Riesling. It's a beauty. But yeah, so we have it's more of a committee. So the committees come down. So the committee and the women's committee come down before Christmas, maybe in the start of December. We set up. We do the full white linen in the shed. Get all the tables set up. They all come down. We cook the barbecue and get beers and wine, and they come down and they love it too. The members come down and get to meet the staff, and it's changed a lot over the years. The staff are really included. We all have our names on our shirts. They all know who's who. The members get to know who those staff are, and it just makes the staff feel more welcome, because when they're out there, that the committeemen will say, "G'day, Pete. G'day, John," and then vice versa. And then as the years go on, different committee changes over and different staff, but they get to know more people, and those people get to introduce them to their playing partners or whatever it is. It's a really good initiative. It's been happening for a very long time. I think it was happening well before my time. It might have been even started in the mid-90s, I reckon. So it's been really good. Sometimes it fluctuates and not many come down. And sometimes you'll have, 16 committee come down. And then it's not just our staff, but all the clubhouse staff can come down as well. If they get time, they can pop down and have something to eat and chat with the members and with the committee. It's really good. It's really great little, as I said right from the very start of this chat, was membership's really, really inclusive. And that's not just of members, but that's of staff as well. And they're very warm and inclusive, making us feel like we're a part of the family. We're a big group. We're helping them. They appreciate the work we do. We're employed there, but we're also really warm. We've just lost some staff. Liz worked there. She retired. It's the only job she's ever had. She was been there for like 47 years or something. And Robin retired the other day. He retired at 73. He'd been there for 25 years or something. So a lot of long-term staff, which is great. Long-term staff means the club's doing something right, but it's really good to have those people around. They're the fabric of the club as well, not just the members, but also the staff. It's a nice thing.
Maybe if we can take a quick look at current golf developments in South Australia. I know there's one which I think has broken ground and one which may still be in the planning phases.
Yeah.
Sam Atkins, the developer, and Darius Oliver are building currently, I believe, the cliffs at Kangaroo Island. Now, when I was over there the last time in January 20, there was the island was decimated by the bushfires. And a lot of people and a lot of wildlife, unfortunately, just lost a lot of habitat. And in fact, a lot of wildlife died as well. I'm just wondering, what is the status of the cliffs at Kangaroo Island?
As far as I know, they've built the practice facility. So they're still struggling with water. So they've got water supply, but they've got to get the water a significant distance from where the supply is to the course. I think they're in the middle of doing that. But I think they're slowly pushing forward. So as far as I know, they were doing the practice fairway and facility so they could start to get some turf growing there, and they can use that turf to move into other parts of the course when that was happening. So there has been some soil turned there. There is some things happening. So that's been a bit of a slow one. I haven't seen it. I hear it's going to be incredible. It's on the cliff tops along the coastline. It's a beautiful part of the world too down there. And the dramatic, even coming into it, the vegetation coming into where the course is going to be, it's going to be pretty amazing, I think. So it's happening. It's just a slow burn with the water. As we said before, if you haven't got water, you can't build a golf course. So it's just getting that water supply to them. I think it's not a big supply. It's a limited supply. So they need to be careful to which grass variety they choose. Even though it's on the island and it's down south, it still can get hot. So I'm not sure you want to go all fescue, because you may end up with limited water. You may have a hard time getting it to survive. So it'd be interesting to see where that lands in time to come.
Sure. And the other one I'm interested to know anything about is obviously the Nordic Arena Dunes, which is Damien and Justice Scanlon. The lads down about 4 hours south of you and 15 kilometres south of Robe, obviously. Just wondering if they've made any headway on that, or is it still sort of on the drawing board, as it were?
It's on the drawing board as far as I know. I think they're actually at the point where they're just looking for some investments and some investors and then getting it started. That's the last I'd heard, but that was probably a year or two ago. It's an incredible parcel of land down there. It's dramatic on the coastline, lots of coastal areas. And it's the good thing about that, it is drivable from Melbourne, from Adelaide, all the other golf courses that are amazing, even Barnbougle. You got to fly. You got to get to the airport, fly there, land, hire a car, get to the golf course and play. Whereas Nordic Arena, you can drive. It's probably a 5-hour drive from Melbourne. It's probably a 3.5-hour drive from Adelaide. I think it's a really good position because it can be a destination without, you could throw 4 guys in a car for 2 tanks of fuel, cost you $50 each, and you could be there and playing golf. Whereas the ones on the islands or overseas, like as in Tasmania and King Island and Kangaroo Island, you've got to get airports, and then it starts to get pretty expensive. So even the ferry going across to Kangaroo Island can be pretty expensive and time consuming. But I reckon Norakareen is in a great spot. I think it's just got to get the funding. No dirt's been, no soil's been turned as far as I know.
Just in case there's any people out there with deep pockets full of money that fancy investing in golf development, I'll stick up a link to norakareenadunes.com in the show notes. And hello to Justin and Damien if they're listening. Right, we're nearly out the gap. Last 3 questions. First of all, how about providing, even though you're a Victorian boy, you might provide us with an elevator pitch for inbound golfers to Australia, focused obviously on South Australia. The locals are always at pains to point out that it's the only state in Australia that was not originally founded as a penal colony.
Yes, yeah, no, I hear that a lot. Lots of churches. So, yeah, that's right. The only state not to be founded as a penal colony. But I think, Adelaide, everything's about 15 minutes away. So that when you're in the city, the airport's 7 minutes away from the city. Everything's close by, but we do have world-class golf courses here. And I think if we picked up the 4 big golf courses here and put them in the Sandbelt, I think we would be in the mix with people talk about Royal Melbourne and Kingston Heath. I think we'd be in that mix as well. So I think we've got great golf courses here. It's just that we aren't in the Sandbelt in Melbourne, so we get forgotten about a bit. But coming over, there's the Barossa and the McLaren Vale. The 2 wineries are 2 wine regions are world class. Penfolds and the high-end wine that's produced from all the wineries around here is amazing. And then the hills. So we really have all of it. The beaches are incredible. The water's warm. Wineries aren't far away. You've got the hills with the wineries and the cities up the road. So it really is got it all combined into one little spot. It has everything, I think, that you need. It's a small little quiet town, and it's quite the conservative. There's no brash decisions over here. Everything is measured in any decision they make. So usually done pretty well in Adelaide. It's most things are done very well. So it's a wonderful place to live, but it's a really great place to visit. Simple, easy, country, great weather. It's a beautiful place to be.
Well, for a blow-in, you've done that very well.
I've lived here long enough.
I know. Listen, bucket list courses, second last question. You can interpret this question however you wish. Generally speaking, I ask for 5, but you can go for a little more, a little bit less. You can go back to places you've been or suggest places that you haven't seen yet.
I'm actually no golfer. So I've visited some amazing golf courses and I've played not that many of them. But to play, I'd love to go to Band and Dunes. I think I'd love to go there because it's just that wow factor on the coast, being involved with Tom Doak, that stuff. I think that would be incredible to go to. I have walked around Shinnecock. I didn't play it. I walked around with John there. That's a course I'd love to play. I think that's probably my favourite course I've ever been to because it had this incredible feel that was so dramatic, yet had no views. It had no coastline views. It had nothing that took your breath away off the golf course. It was just the golf course proper was amazing. So I would love to play that. That's just, and you drove around it and walked around. It's not the same as playing each hole. I think I'd love to go over and to play that and walked St Andrews during the 150th, which was amazing. But I think that's on everyone's bucket list to get there and just to play St Andrews and play it when it's hot, dry, and hard. I think that's when I'd love to play it. I'd be able to putt my way around and not lose too many golf balls, but that's golf proper. That'd be awesome to play and just to have a wander around there. That's, as I said, I'm no golfer, but they're the ones I'd love to play just for those reasons. Seen them, but not actually seen the 2 of them, apart from Bandon, but just to play them would be pretty amazing. Never got the opportunity.
You're a name dropper, if nothing else, Mr. Bennett, a name dropper. Listen, in terms of golf book recommendations, which is our final recurring question, building a more rounded golf library has been a key driver to enabling me to start this podcast. For the benefit of listeners who may be on a similar augmentation journey, what 2 golf books, or indeed what 2 books, would you recommend for consideration?
This is going to be pretty boring. This one, I'm not much of a book reader, so I've got a few books that I've read, but I like reading, but not of golf. So I'm more of a fiction book. But it's funny enough, when I went for the interview here, I got the centenary, the 1992. You got the book there in front of you. I loved it. It was just, I read it a couple of times before I come for the interview because it's got all this quirky stuff in it and how they come about funding the original purchase of the club and fencing off the greens, and then having to get rid of the bulls because the bulls getting a bit amorous and chasing the members and all sorts of random stuff that it was just hilarious. And I loved reading it because it made me feel like it gives the appreciation of how old and how much history it's been here. So I really do love that book, because you can't get the copies anymore. You got to get them off someone. There's none out there. So so I'm not much of a golf book reader. Some guys get right into it and they're obsessed by it, but I'm not one of them. So I can't help you with that. I can't help you with giving you any more books to put in your library.
Okay. Well, as a result of that, I'm going to read a passage out then, and give listeners something from this. Okay. So it actually relates to, or the dawn, should I say. So in 1961, Ian McLaughlin was involved in one of the most extraordinary matches played in the Simpson Cup competition. He and his opponent, Sir Donald Bradman, the great cricketer, having been all square after 18 holes at Kayunga, battled on in driving rain and failing late. After having 6 more holes, and by now completely saturated and in the dark, they were forced to stop with the match still square. Some weeks later, the South Australia Golf Association, having ruled that a decision must be reached, the match resumed late at night after a dinner at Kayunga, as you do, with Glenn Hutton, then the secretary of the club, substituting for Bradman. He and McLaughlin, both in dinner suits, made their way through darkness, relieved only by car headlights, to the 25th hole, the short 7th, where McLaughlin hit his tee shot to the green and won with a par 3. There's also another funny story in there about, I think, men's dressing room. Somebody got a member got a letter basically giving out to them, strongly worded letter probably, giving out to them that they were using the water bowl in the dressing room in the wrong manner. In fact, this particular individual was found washing his feet in the face bowl. And anyway, he hurriedly made a response to the committee saying that he'd received their letter and he had seen somebody else washing their balls in there. Now, I would suspect it was probably golf balls, but it's a good story.
It's a ripping little. It's a book, and then I think once you've been here, you remember here, then you read it, it would give you more meaning because you can relate to all these names and all these things that have happened. Yeah. It's a wonderful club. Things like the captains. Some of these captains have been 3rd generation captains. They've worked their way down the line. It's amazing how they really take care of the place and love the place. It's a wonderful. I feel blessed to be employed here. It's a wonderful place.
Well, Nathan, that's us done. I'm out of questions. All that's left is to thank you for your time today. It really is appreciated. Keep up the great work. And I look forward to once again wandering the fairways at Seaton with the many friends I've been pleased to make acquaintance with over the years. Go easy, mate.
Good. Thanks, mate. Thanks for your time. Cheers.
Many thanks for tuning in. We really do hope you enjoyed the show. If you don't yet follow us on Twitter, X, Instagram, or indeed our Substack account, you can do so at Firm and Fast Golf on X, at Firm and Fast Golf Podcast on Instagram, and at the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast occasional newsletter on Substack. Finally, if you're so inclined, you could leave us a star rating or even a review on your podcast platform of choice. It really would be appreciated. Until the next time, happy golfing.